In today's lesson, we will talk about domestic violence and child abuse. Each year, the lives of men and women are altered or destroyed by someone who abuses them. The resulting emotional scars, physical scars, and destruction are evident in social and crime statistics. Although abuse is significantly underreported, current crime statistics at least begin to tell the story. The FBI's Uniform Crime Report routinely lists domestic violence as the leading cause of injury to women ages 15 to 44 in the United States of America. These injuries are more than those from car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. This is a significant problem, and one that often flies under the radar among church members and pastors. Today, you will learn a definition of domestic violence, the effects of domestic violence on children, the definition of child abuse, the connection between domestic violence and child abuse, symptoms of child abuse, characteristics of child abuse, and how the church can help in cases of domestic violence and child abuse. I chose this topic because a number of you enrolled in this class are involved in ministry with youth or with children, and as a result you have contact with parents. Now, what is domestic violence? Well, as you can see on the slide before you, domestic violence is a pattern of assaultive and coercive behaviors, including physical, sexual, and psychological attacks, as well as economic coercion, that adults or adolescents use against their intimate partners. The U.S. Department of Justice estimates that 95% of reported assaults on spouses or ex-spouses are committed by men against women. I am convinced that men need to stand up in regard to this issue. It will be a hard fight for women to prevail in, but men can prevail in this area to help prevent domestic violence, and I call upon all of you men to stand up and help put an end to this curse. A crime against one's own family, against a spouse, or a child shatters the trust upon which healthy families are built. It causes psychological and emotional damage that often cannot be repaired. It can be the most damaging and debilitating force in a child's life. Being exposed to domestic violence does have a profound effect on children. On this slide and several slides following this one, we will discuss and try to answer the question, what are the effects of domestic violence on children? Being exposed to domestic violence affects children's emotional, developmental, and physical well-being. These children are more likely to be abused themselves because they may be caught in harm's way during a violent episode and be inadvertently injured. They may experience behavioral problems related to anger, aggression, and behaviors that just are out of the norm for a child. They may have depression or anxiety, and they have these more than the average child. They also tend to spend less time with their friends, worry more about the safety of their friends, and are less likely to have a best friend. At school or church, children that are exposed to domestic violence may have elevated rates of behavior problems, hyperactivity, social withdrawal, and learning difficulties. We continue to try to answer the question, what are the effects of domestic violence on children? And to those already presented, we add these. Children exposed to domestic violence are also a higher risk of being exposed to other forms of abuse. Exposure to domestic violence may also cause other long-term effects, such as an increased risk of entering the juvenile justice system, attempting suicide, committing sexual assault crimes, and abusing drugs and alcohol. How does this impact a child? Well, this kind of violence is very damaging. It robs the child of the feeling of personal safety. What are the effects of domestic violence on children? Well, a child loses the sense that the world is a safe place. This is so sad. Another effect is that children have the psychological choice of remaining helpless or identifying with the aggressor. Aggression has been their only model. Children may become fearful and withdraw. We will continue addressing the question, what are the effects of domestic violence on children, on this slide and the subsequent one. Young and older children often blame themselves for causing a parent's anger. Older children may blame themselves for not intervening. Children may tune it out. They just tune out the episode and try not to remember it. Children often have difficulty concentrating at school and church. Now we conclude answering the question, what are the effects of domestic violence on children, as we look at this slide. Children who accompany their mothers to take refuge in shelters continue to have problems, even in a safe environment. Children may suffer from post-traumatic stress. The adults may not be able to help their children. Young children may accept family violence as a normal way of life. Now, let's review the answers to the question, what are the effects of domestic violence on children? Being exposed to domestic violence affects children's emotional, developmental, and physical well-being. They also tend to spend less time with their friends, worry more about the safety of their friends, and are less likely to have best friends. Children exposed to domestic violence are also a higher risk of being exposed to other forms of abuse. Exposure to domestic violence may also cause other long-term effects. A child loses the sense that the world is a safe place. Children have the psychological choice of remaining helpless or identifying with the aggressor. Aggression has been their only model. Children may become fearful and withdraw. Young and older children often blame themselves for causing a parent's anger. Older children may blame themselves for not intervening. Children may tune it out. Children often have difficulty concentrating at church and school. Children who accompany their mothers to take refuge in shelters continue to have problems, even in a safe environment. Children may suffer from post-traumatic stress. The adults in the child's life may not be able to help their children. And young children may accept family violence as a normal way of life. Researchers have long been aware of the link between domestic violence and child abuse. Even if children are witnesses to acts of violence and not the intended targets, they can be affected in the same way as children who are physically and sexually abused. Since domestic violence is a pattern of behavior, not a single event, episodes may become more severe and more frequent over time, resulting in an increased likelihood that the children eventually become victims. Now, what is child abuse? Prevent Child Abuse America defines child abuse as a non-accidental injury or pattern of injuries to a child. Child abuse is damage to a child for which there is no reasonable explanation. Child abuse includes non-accidental physical injury, neglect, sexual molestation, and emotional abuse. H. Norman Wright provides for us 3 symptoms that we should watch for that help us understand abused children. Often they take the blame. Many abused children feel they are the cause for the abuse. They come to believe the many statements made to them that they're bad. They experience parents who yell and cuss at them and threaten to abandon them and to make them leave home. Many grow up feeling unwanted. Further, the abused child grows up feeling he or she never does anything right and never meets his or her parents' unrealistic expectations. Whatever problems occur within the family, well, the child is blamed. And then they often feel anger and rage. Abused children feel anger and rage, but at home they can't express those feelings. They learn both to deny and to repress fear, anger, bitterness, and hatred. Any expression of their feelings leads to further repercussions that they want at all costs to try to avoid. And then they are untrusting. An abused child has difficulty trusting other people. Most children who are abused should be treated by a professional counselor. I would encourage you to develop a network of counselors that you can call upon when you become aware of the unfortunate crisis that is all too prevalent in our society today. H. Norman Wright has helped us by providing several characteristics of abused children. The abuse of a child may involve being neglected or abused physically, emotionally, or sexually. Each type of abuse carries its own distinct characteristics, which help you to identify an abused child. I want to share with you now some of the characteristics that are common to all abused children, regardless of the type of abuse. First, a child may appear to be different from other children in emotional or physical makeup. In some cases, parents of this child may describe him or her as being different or even bad. Second, a child may seem overly fearful of his or her own parents. The child may be hesitant to go to the parents and express his or her real fears or feelings. Then third, a child has extremes in behavior, such as crying too easily or being overly sensitive. Or the child may block his or her emotions and appear not to even care. And then, fourth, a child may show signs or evidences of poor overall care. Their clothes may be dirty, torn, or not fit well, and in the winter the child may not be wearing proper clothing. These are evidences of a child who is being neglected. And then a child may be very cautious of physical contact, especially when interacting with an adult. There also may be other extremes, when an abused child appears starved for adult attention, but his or her methods of getting it are inappropriate. Some children show a radical change in their general, overall behavior. On these last two slides, I want to address the subject, what the church can do. First, how can the church help the abused domestic partner? Well, the church can help by being aware of the problem. Pastors and church members should be aware of the extent of the problem and realize that it is not just in the secular world. It's in our own pews. Second, pastors and counselors need to help abused victims set boundaries in their lives. Battered women often find it difficult to make choices because someone else has been making choices for them for a long time. Many women who live in violent homes went from their father's house straight to their abuser's house. They've never had much experience in making their own personal choices. If you're seeking to help an abuse victim, you should encourage her to make her own decisions, resist the temptation to rescue and take over her life. She needs to feel empowered, not helpless or dependent upon you. At the same time, you can provide suggestions about finding a family counselor or a domestic violence agency. Third, provide support. She needs to hear from you that she doesn't deserve to be abused. Acknowledge the seriousness of the situation, and don't let her convince herself that the abuse will go away. And then be prepared for crisis intervention. Quick action may be necessary to protect her and her children. Ask her to describe the circumstances of the last 2 or 3 beatings. What precipitated the attack? Was it drugs, alcohol, an argument, or just a violent temper? Where is her relationship with the abuser right now? A pastor or counselor, a minister, who receives a crisis call only has a few minutes to discern the extent of the threat and appropriate action that should be taken. Can she find her way to a safe place immediately? Do you have a place for her to go if necessary? Sometimes the crisis arrives at your office or at your home. A minister or a caring friend may need to arrange for medical attention and a safe place away from the abuser. If the couple is separated, she may be stalked by the abuser. She needs to know who can protect her and how to contact legal services. Then fifth, the church should address this important issue of domestic violence. Speak on this issue if you're a pastor. We need to break our silence that is surrounding abuse and confront it with biblical principles. The church should hold those who are batterers responsible for their action. Tough love should be a tool used to fight abuse in our communities. If the person who is an abuser is a member of the church, then Matthew 18 provides a model for confronting the offender within the church. Christians have an important role in dealing with abuse within our society. I appeal to you, let's make an effort to eradicate domestic violence and child abuse in our generation. Now, let's turn our attention to what the church can do in providing help for abused children. First, immediately report the abuse. It is your legal duty to report the abuse. In most states, it's a crime if a minister knows about child abuse and does not report it. So I want to ask you to immediately report abuse. Don't remain silent on this crucial issue. Second, listen to the child without being judgmental or critical. The child needs your support. They need to know that you believe the story they're telling. Give the child time to process their feelings. There are no quick solutions or fixes. There are no quick cures. Give positive feedback to children and build their sense of self-confidence. Give positive feedback. Number 5, reassure them that they are not the cause of the crisis, the violence, or the problem between mom and dad. Ministry to help the victims of domestic violence and child abuse will not be a visible ministry that the community will perhaps understand or know about. But you will know that you have been God's representative to help victims in both cases. I encourage you to make this a priority in your ministry.